Hey, MOMnation. Welcome to Mental Wealth with Laura Wood and Katie Holly Lambert, where we talk through generational trauma so we can leave a new legacy for our children. Counselor Laura is with Benavieri Counseling out of Chandler, Arizona, and you can find her on Facebook, on the web, or by the link in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey, MOMnation. Welcome back to another episode with Katie and Laura. It is Mental Wealth. We are here to talk emotions and mental health. And what else do we talk about here, Laura?
I think we talk about all the feels, and I think we talk about just about everything that comes up. It's almost like therapy live, but it's not real therapy. It's therapy adjacent. Kind of anything that comes up. I never know exactly where we're gonna get, but we go and we figure it out, and it's always a ride, and it's my favorite hour of my month.
Me too. And I feel like our conversation always gets where it needs to get to. And, I've gotten a lot of feedback because we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Crazy. Yes. And I've gotten feedback here and there. It's starting to come a little bit more frequently. I feel like maybe our show might be getting out there a little bit more. But I'm getting feedback that, hey, I saw XYZ episode a couple of months ago and you guys really spoke to me. Like, I felt like you were talking about me. I felt like, I was right there in the room with you. And this, like, that's the best, right?
That is the best. I love that. And, I feel like it's been 2 months,
yes,
because we do the last day of the month
off. Yeah.
And that's what, December, January. So I think we've got so much to talk about. I was thinking about it this morning. I was like, gosh, how are we going to go like 3 hours? What's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so much time has passed. We've got so much to talk about and so many people to hopefully connect with,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And you know how you and I are. We can get on a topic and we can be there all day.
Forever.
But that's okay. We love it. We enjoy each other, and that's the important part.
I know it is.
So today I want to talk a bit about, and there's a few reasons why I want to talk about this. One of the reasons is because I know this is day 1 of March, but February, we celebrated, I don't know if celebrate is the right word, but we recognized Cancer Prevention Month.
Yeah. And I know you guys did your hike and everything, which was so cool.
We did the climb, which was great. We hiked 7.5 miles that day. So like, I'm not new to working out, but the day after, I could barely move.
Yeah, that stuff is no joke.
Yeah, so that was good. We had a series of videos of live and learn videos, just about cancer prevention, kind of the different things that we should know about. And as we're kind of getting up there in years, the different things that we should be concerned about in terms of getting screened and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so throughout a couple of those shows, I spoke with some cancer survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, those are really touching stories because, at one point in time, they weren't sure if they were going to still be here, at the end. And so the reason for today's topic is twofold. There's that piece of it because we just came off of that. And then for those of you who don't know, I know you know, Laura, but I lost my pup of 12 years at the end of January. And it was so hard. And I wasn't ready for that. And here I am, an adult, like I know this stuff happens. I know that dogs aren't around forever. I've had her since she was however old you can, get them from their mama. So she was my baby. I mean, she's older than my son.
Right.
And the last couple of years, I could see a decline. And, the conversations with the vet were getting more and more frequent about her state. And I thought that I was prepared, Laura. I thought I was ready. I knew this was coming. I knew someday we were going to have to make a decision that we weren't excited about, but I felt like we were ready. And I was not ready. I was worried about my son mostly, thinking, hey, she's the only dog he's ever known. She was here when he was a baby. Like, it's going to be rough for him. So I was kind of more concerned about him. The
Mhm.
person that it hit the worst in the family was little old me.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, oh, shit, like my parents are getting older.
Right.
I don't know if I'm ready for that. Like, I know life is not guaranteed, and I know any one of us can not be here tomorrow for a variety of reasons, but time is ticking
Yeah.
for some of these family members that I'm pretty fond of, you know, I'm pretty close to. And I just wanted to talk with you a bit about dealing with grief as a mom,
Mm,
because I feel like we obviously have that role where, you know, some of us are mom and dad,
right.
you know, but the mom role is a pretty intense role. Like we still have to do all the things,
Somewhat
and we're
demanding, you know?
somewhat, you know,
Yeah.
and like
Right.
more than a job.
Right. Right.
But we're dealing, like, how do we deal with grief, still be the supportive mom, still be, you know, that pillar of strength for our children, and still do all the things, but not disregard ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's such a good question. I, one of the things that I do in my practice is really specialize in working with moms and how raising kids with our own trauma is so much harder than anybody has ever prepared us for.
Ever.
Um, and the way that our own stuff interacts with our ability to support our kids is unfair, like nearly impossible. Like it can feel unsurvivable. It's so complicated the way our insides have to navigate supporting the survival of somebody else while supporting our own survival.
Mm.
It's just not a thing that you can prepare for. It's not a thing that is talked about at all in my experience as a mom who, as a traumatized person and as a mom, you know, like those things don't come up. Nobody says that. And I think that I want to talk about it so much more because women are responsible for so much. Women are demanded, so there's so much demanded of us to give everyone everything that they need and also somehow be some level of like superhumanly stable in the face of our own challenges, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's just this ultimate like what about me that is so difficult to navigate and so difficult to move through when we have something happening for us that's really 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 hard or that we feel is like intolerable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't get the space to lay in bed for
Right.
days.
Not at
We don't
all.
get the space to take you know, some time off and be alone and reflect and really like experience our own grief and our own needs and attend to ourselves with the freedom that a person who was not raising kids or a person who was not supporting others really might have. Because we know that going through, let's talk about specifically grief, we have a lot of complicated thoughts and feelings that are happening kind of all at once, and we're also trying to like just get through the day, and that triggers our own sense of mortality, and it triggers our own sense of like are we doing enough, are we living our lives to our fullest, are we focusing on the right things, we're thinking about reprioritizing, and then we're thinking about, you know, all of these other things, and you know, as you mentioned, like potential future loss and, you know, all of these things. And then, you know, we also have to go to the grocery store. We also have to make
Yeah.
someone dinner. We also have to
Do
uh,
homework.
do homework. We have to wake up on time. We have to get everyone to school on time. We can't, we can't give ourselves as much time as we need sometimes to really just process those complicated feelings because we have to stop that process, 57 times every minute, an hour to attend to the needs of our children and our families.
Yeah. And then what if, you know, like in my case, let's just say my son did take it harder than he did. I mean, he obviously
Right.
was sad, but he did really well with it.
Mhm.
Like I said, a lot better than I did. But what if he didn't? Now I'm trying to manage somebody else's grief at the same time.
Yeah, and that's actually so hard for a couple of reasons. One, because as a like our internal biological system that interacts with our children, like as a mom, we don't always know whose feelings we're feeling.
Mm,
So we get confused, right? When our children are going through something, we can actually get confused whether or not it's us that's going through it or if it's them that's going through it, and like whose feelings are whose feelings. And so like we then kind of see it as this like insurmountable, overwhelming problem to solve, because we're thinking, okay, my kid's going through this, and then our own experience of it is like overlaying on top of what our kids are going through. And so we're sort of sometimes solving more problems than we need to solve. We get too deep into it with the kids because we're afraid of like what we're going through. And so we start talking to them too much about what our feelings are. And then we're giving them more than they already had. And they need something specific from us, but we can't tell the difference between what they need to work through and what we need to work through.
right. Because two totally different things, especially, if we're talking maybe a younger child, maybe it's not an adult child that you're helping
Mm-hmm.
support, right? So maybe it's like in my case, a 10-year-old or a
Right,
5-year-old. So now we have to navigate age appropriate.
right. And we have to stop and say, like, okay, this 10-year-old's experience is not the same as my experience. The fears that he's experiencing may not be the same as my fears, but we have these assumptions based on our experience. And like, we think, oh, well, he must be thinking this. And so we sort of like can superimpose those fears that we have or those feelings that we have onto what they're going through and totally miss the point and not be able to support them, and then like cause them even more sort of confusion and distress than they would really have on their own if we were sort of just objectively able to question what they're going through and say like, okay, what's this like for you? And you know, minimally move them through it without adding on additional layers of stress and concern. Like I with as a therapist, that when I work with kids, I'll often sit with a kid, and their parent might be there too, and the kid is kind of telling me about something, like let's say they're talking about grief or they're talking about whatever, and then the parent is like, oh well, he's feeling like this, he's feeling like this, he's feeling like this. And I'm like, well, hold on. Let me just talk to this kid and like get their experience. And their experience is like, 3% of the level of distress that the parent is basically like assuming for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can be objective. I always tell the parents of my therapy clients, like, I'm like, look, like I can do this in this room as with your child differently than I can in my own life with my own child,
Yeah, right.
right?
Makes sense.
I'm a much better therapist to your child than I am an objective, parent to my own. Like
Right.
it's not, because there's so much interaction with our own experience of like, am I going to do this right? Am I going to help them better? Are they going to be okay? Are they, there's so many things that are happening inside of us that we're unable to sometimes separate from what's happening for them. And so when we're working with a kid through grief, like we really want to not assume anything and ask like questions that we think are even obvious. Like if a child is saying like, I'm really sad that this happened, And then we might say to them like, oh, I understand it's sad. Like you'll never see them again, or like they won't be able to be there to comfort you, right? Like we're assuming all these reasons for their sadness.
Right.
And instead, what we can do is say like, I understand it's okay to be sad. Tell me what you're most sad about. And then they might say something like, you know, I, that the dog's, not going to be able to have its treats anymore. And here you are going into like all these really crazy things that are like high level difficulty where like the kids just like, man, they really loved those treats and now they won't be able to have those treats anymore. And it's like, okay, well, that's a different conversation.
Right.
That's so much easier to like support them through and be like, yeah, that's true. They really loved their treats, but I bet that in doggy heaven or whatever, they get all the treats they want. And then the kid's like, okay, great. I'm okay now. Like
Mhm.
I'm now, that has reconciled my pain and my confusion and my question, and I can just move past it. And I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I'm never going to see the dog again. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that they're not going to be able to sleep with me anymore. I went,
Mhm.
right. I was just worried about these treats. And so we need to back out of our own like assumptions of what they're possibly sad about and really just say like, what are you the most sad about? Or like, what does that mean for you? And sometimes I think we're afraid to ask those questions because we don't know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And we don't know how we're going to be able to respond to them. And so we come with some pre-assumed responses. And so we stay in our own lane of like what we're comfortable with without letting the kid really experience their own reaction, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it does. And I can see that in different scenarios, not necessarily loss or grief, where I totally do that to my kid.
Oh my God. Yeah. We do this all the time.
Yeah, instead of just finding out what's going on for him, I'm like, oh yeah, and this and that and this, and then all of a sudden you see his eyes get bigger and the stress mounts, and whoops, I didn't mean to do that.
Right. Like I just increased the size of your problem instead of asking what size of the problem we're in right now, right? And so
Mhm.
we want to help our kids move through it at their own stage. And the fact of this is that it's much simpler than we even might realize because we're coming in with this complex view of what might be going on.
You're the best. I'm sorry, but I could see he's totally like, Mom, let's play. And I don't mean to
I
interrupt you, but
know.
you're doing so good.
I'm sorry for those of you who are not on the visual medium of YouTube or what Facebook, you're just listening. My dogs are jumping all over me and pawing at me and barking at me to provide them with whatever they want. And I am pretending like it's not happening and it's sort of a shit show.
It's a bit hilarious.
So I might just actually text one of my kids to come down and like play with them or something. But
Yeah, good idea.
but yeah, like the simplicity. So I tell parents a lot of the time, I'm like, do less. Like we come in with all these complex ideas of what might be going on. And we're like racking our brain, like, I have to have the right thing to say. I have to know how to deal with this. I have to have all these like things prepared in my mind. But the reality is, like, don't do any of that. Just stop and be like, huh, why? Why are you sad? And that sounds like a stupid question, right? Like my dog just died. Of course I'm sad.
Yeah.
But we want them to say, like, why is it sad for you? We're not saying we don't think you should be sad. We're not saying like it doesn't make sense to be sad. And that's the thing about these questions is like a lot of the time, like if you said to me, oh, my dog passed away, and I said to you, like, why is that upsetting? You might think like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, of course it's upsetting.
Yeah, like duh.
Right. But I'm not saying it shouldn't be upsetting. I'm saying what's upsetting for you? What for you is the most upsetting about this? And that's really the attunement. And so if we just back out of our own ideas about what possibly is upsetting and we
Oops, you froze on me, Laura. Can you hear me now? Come back. I need like the little Titanic rose. Come back. She's gone, people. Oh no. Oh, there you
Technical.
are. You froze.
I'm back.
It's okay. I
Okay.
entertained everybody while you were gone.
Okay, great. I'm sorry about that. But the odds are that if you really just ask them to tell you what's going on and you just listen and you don't try to come up with like some brilliant solution, but you really just say like, yeah, I could understand that. Like, what about, what do you think about this idea? Or like, what do you think that could be, how would you like to, make that better? Or like, what would your idea be if it could be better? Like, what would that look like? And we're just letting them work through it themselves
Mm-hmm.
because they have ideas just like we do, and they're kid-size ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to come up with kid-size ideas for them. We let them come up with their own kid-size ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like relieving your pressure. Like, don't like pressure's off, mom. Stop solving it. Stop coming in with your assumptions of distress and overcomplicated ideas of like what this could be like for a kid, because your brain is not a 10-year-old's brain.
Right.
You can't know how simple this could be for them until you really ask, and then let that simple answer be the simple answer.
I love that. Something that Matt and I struggled with a bit because it happened very quickly. So it literally was overnight. I mean,
Ugh.
she was declining, but overnight she declined rapidly. And we had noticed it. My son was in bed by the time we had noticed it. And when we got up in the morning before he got up, we called the vet, and the vet was like, yeah, it's probably time. Here are a few numbers of, for the next step. And we struggled with how to tell him in an age appropriate way.
Yeah, that is a hard one. I think always my answer is the simpler, the better. Like, hey, he was not feeling well and he, has passed away.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, just simple, clear, direct. Because what we want to avoid is confusion. Oh boy, my thumbs up
Oh, that
didn't
is
mean
so cute.
so
How'd you
annoying.
do that?
I
If you
don't
were
know.
watching on the podcast, she had a thumbs up come up. It was so funny. You're full of surprises
I
today.
know. I don't know what my problem is. So what we want to avoid is confusion, and we want to avoid unanswered like extra information that like they can't process. We want to kind of make it as simple and clear as possible. Like, he's not coming back, like passed away is not like they'll be back later, or they went to a farm. Like, we just he's passed away, and that's okay. And we can celebrate our memories of him, and we can have all these moments together. Because what that does is it keeps them from being afraid.
Mm-hmm.
When we beat around the bush and when we avoid directness, what we're doing is we're inferring to the person that it's not an okay thing to talk about, that it's scary, and that it's too much. And so then we're basically putting ideas in their head that it's scary and it's too much. And then they're like, well, why doesn't my mom want to talk about this? Like, maybe I shouldn't ask her more questions. Like, maybe I should just, and then they start to have to internalize it inside
Mm-hmm.
to protect us. And so what we want to do is we want to use calm confidence and be direct and not harsh,
Right.
but we want to be direct, and we want to be available for like, what that might mean for them. And we want to give them space and time to work through that. And we don't want to force them to worry that their questions or their thoughts or their ideas are going to hurt us, because we're so fragile in our own grief that they aren't safe to bring it up.
Yeah. I think that's giant.
Yeah.
Now, do you suggest the same approach? Now, we're talking about a dog here in my specific situation.
Mm-hmm.
But, for those of us that have aging parents, like I'm starting to kind of think about that now, and he's extremely close to his grandparents. Right. Do you suggest the same approach when it's a human?
I do. I do, because what we want to do is we want to give as little we want to kind of share like what's going on and say like they've passed away, and then just like let them ask questions and answer their questions. Because what that allows them to do is process through the unknowns for them. Trauma happens when we go through something hard and we don't understand it, we can't process through it, and we're alone in it.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is a wound that can be healed easily and I guess easily is not the right word, but like, smoothly, I guess, in real time, when we are able to have the bad thing that happened, we can make it make sense for us, right? Like we can reconcile it through our narrative, and we can get our questions answered. We're not left confused and wondering,
Mm-hmm.
and we have support through it. That's how you heal trauma wounds in real time and prevent those from becoming post-traumatic distress later on.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a person, we say to them, whatever, like if there was an accident or if there's whatever, like that's fine. They were sick
Mm-hmm.
and they passed away, or there was an accident and they passed away. Then the child response, let that response be the guide through the conversation, versus like, don't give too much ahead of time. Don't over prepare them, because what we're doing in that case is we're building up fear, anticipation, confusion, and we're just building up this sense of like, I'm not going to know how, right? So like the more we present it from a perspective of like, this is something that we can move through, and that this is something that's not going to ruin us, and this is something that we can tolerate and handle as a family, the more we present that confidence in our capacity to deal with hard things, and the more we present our support in our willingness to address their questions and talk them through it 1,000 times, then the more we're giving them a safe space to reconcile it in real time. And so when we experience something really, really difficult, we have all these thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
all these competing thoughts. We have questions, we have differing views. We have, well, what about this? What if they can come back? What if, or, well, now I'm mad at them because they left me, or was it the doctor's fault? Or, right. Like, so we have all these things going on. Kids are going to have that too. And what happens for us is if we can't get those questions sort of smoothed out and reconciled and acknowledged in real time, then we stew on them, right? They become looping thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And they become intrusive, and they become sometimes obsessive, or sometimes really harmful. And so what we're doing is we're allowing that child to ask all those questions, to say all those things, even if they don't make sense, even if they're, it was something we would consider like mean, or something we would consider bad.
Mm-hmm.
No, we just let them have that, because sometimes we get really angry when we lose somebody, and we might wish somebody else was dead instead. What if a kid says, well, I wish that, this other person died instead because I don't like them as much as I like this person.
Yeah.
How are we going to respond to that? We need to be like that. I understand that thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just let it move. Like, we don't need to criticize their rationalization or their automatic instinct responses to something horrible, because we all have those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not scary. That doesn't mean anything about us. And so what we're teaching them is that thoughts, when we feel hurt and angry, don't say anything bad about us. They don't mean that we're going to act on them. Like, that doesn't mean your kid's going to go like murder this other person. Like, that's no, it's just,
Right.
right? Like, or that they're mean or horrible or insensitive or whatever. It just means that they're a human with a natural like response to this. And we're just like, I can understand that thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to accept that this person has passed away. And then we just kind of focus on that pain, right? And we kind of go back to it is really hard to lose someone we love so much. And we don't necessarily, you don't need to go down that road of like, well, you can't wish that somebody else was dead. Like, okay, well, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like we're solving the
Yeah.
wrong problem in that case. So we want to kind of stay near the root issue, which is they're upset that they lost this person. And that's
Mm-hmm.
hard and that's sad and it's true and it's permanent and we're going to get through it.
What if one of those questions during that conversation or during, one of the conversations ends up being, well, now I'm worried that that's going to happen to you, Mom.
Yeah. I think that's a natural question. Like, does that mean that you can die?
Yeah.
You know? And then in that case, we answer the question honestly and simply by saying, all people are living, all living things can have an end of their life. And right now, I'm here with you, and we're not, and I'm not, I'm okay. And I'm right here. And I'm going to protect you and be with you through this process.
Yeah,
Right?
I love that answer because I was thinking about that. Well, what would I say? And I immediately went to, well, don't worry about that. Like, I'll never leave you. But that's not true.
That's not true.
And what if, you know, heaven forbid something were to happen and I did leave him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we sort of want to, we're not trying to like promise I'm going to live forever, but we're also not trying to say like, well, yeah, I could die tomorrow. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? We kind of want to like zoom out of that a little bit and say like, I think that's a normal fear that's a good question. And, all living things have an end of their life. But I'm here with you right now. And I'm not going anywhere.
And I'll sit here as long as you need me to, or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we're going to get back to right now. So when we're thinking about the future, we're in this fear, trying to predict, like, so we want to bring it back to right now. And that helps them stay in their space of like what's actually happening right now, what's actually the problem that we're working through. We're not going to start working through future potential problems. We're going to acknowledge that those fears are reasonable and natural to come up, and we're going to be here. I'm here right now with you. And that's what's important, is that we're going to get through this together. So we want to try not to go down those tangential pathways where which is what happens in our brains, right? Because again, we're trying to reconcile it. We're trying to make it make sense.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about what the child's grieving process might look like, and maybe the different ways that it possibly could show up? For example, such sweet clients of ours. Unfortunately, this was the saddest story ever. The wife, the mom, ended up losing her life to cancer very quickly. She was not much older than us. And oh, so sad. And she had a little boy about my son's age. And she literally found out probably about 6 or 7 months before she passed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I attended the funeral again, super great clients of ours, now friends, at this point, you know what I mean? And I attended the funeral, and the little boy was there. And he was sitting in the back of the funeral home on his iPad or tablet, whatever, and he was watching a show and he was laughing. And he was, into his show, and he was doing what 9-year-old boys do. And it struck me at first, I was like, first of all, who is laughing? Like, it's, and then I realized what was going on and who it was. And I just said to myself, everybody copes differently. And I'm sure he understands where he's at and he knows what's going on. He's 9. But can we just kind of talk about what that might look like? Because no one that I saw approached him or said, hey, don't do that or shut up your show or
Sure.
anything like that. But there might be in that same sort of scenario, an adult might do that
Mhm.
and might view that as not his personal process. So can we just kind of
Mhm.
like talk a little bit about what that might look like for different kids?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's stages. We've all heard of stages of grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's denial, there's bargaining, there's anger, there's acceptance, depression. I'm not going in order. But what we want to remember is that these stages don't go in order. These stages happen more than one time.
Mm-hmm.
I can be in one state, I can be in all 5 stages in one day, and I can but essentially those are all the sort of thought categories and feeling categories that we experience when we're trying to reconcile this information and what that means for our lives and what that means for our experience and what that means for us. And so if a child, first of all, a child experiencing the loss of a parent is so incomprehensibly big
Yeah.
for us as adults, like to really even understand, like a loss of a parent is essentially a huge life threat to the child. So that life threat could be that because they're feeling like, okay, well, this person was supposed to take care of me and now they're not there to take care of me. So I might not get taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm dependent. I can't make it on the streets. I don't have my own job and house and whatever. Like,
Right.
so the loss of a caregiver is so much bigger for a child than it is for an adult. And so kids can't tolerate knowing that they're never going to get their childhood needs met by their parent.
Yeah.
That's just not that's not a possible thing for them to fully grasp in childhood. It's not possible. And so when you have a kid who's like distracting, avoiding, denying, right? Like, oh, everything's fine. Like she'll be back next week.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna watch this show. Like this isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like to be at your own mother's funeral as a 9-year-old child, like I can't even begin to describe the kinds of feelings and thoughts and like visceral fear and abandonment and loss and the depth of that is in fact unfathomable.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is we want to let our kids kind of go through what they need to go through, and we can recognize that as like that's denial, that's avoidance, that's whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and then what we want to do is we want to watch out for changes in thinking, changes in behavior. So like when a kid experiences death or serious injury or like risk of death for the first time, it changes their worldview. So there's like a before I knew about this could happen, and then there's an after I knew about this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
It changes their ability to process information in their brain. It changes their understanding of themselves as humans. It changes everything. So every kid will go through this at some point. The younger, the harder.
Yeah.
And so because it is such a difficult thing, like a child's brain doesn't have the complex processing ability to really, really fully grasp it. And so they're going to re-experience that at many different stages of development. And they're going, as their brain develops, we have, let's say like a burst of new brain development. So now we have new processing capacity. We've just upgraded our CPU, like, so now we have more processing capacity. Well, that information is going to resurface in the context of this new processing capacity. And it's going to need to be reconciled again. Right. So it's like something that they maybe have gotten over early or gotten through might come back up at the next developmental stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to come back up again at the next developmental stage because we're able to now process it with a new processor and a more complex understanding of what happened. And so that's going to happen several times throughout their lifespan. And so when we're watching for a child's have they moved through all the stages? Are they becoming fearful? So like after a death, kids will become, there's a feeling they can become depressed, they can become afraid, they can become rigid, they can become angry. So like you might notice that they react in a way that isn't related, but the behavior is an expression of the feeling. So for example, they might they might have a hard time like being close to people because now they're afraid that somebody else might die or something like that.
Right.
They might start to have like a defense against closeness by being like, no, I'm going to be alone. I don't need anybody. Right. And so like that kind of thing, you don't immediately think that it's related, but it could be a reaction to their sense of like dependence and their fear of not being able to support themselves. And so we have what's called a defense against that attachment need. And so they might start trying to push people away. What we want to do is not go away. We're going to continue to be close and say like, that's okay. I'm still going to be here for you no matter what. They might start stealing. They might start lying. They might start eating differently. They might want to change their appearance or their habits, or they might stop liking activities that they liked before and changing everything, right? It's like when you go through a breakup and like you get bangs.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's this like need to like be different now because everything's different now, right? Like it's just, they're just working through it. And so we want to like recognize that these changes in behavior very may be likely resulting from this shift in their world. And we want to be compassionate about that and not, what we don't want to do is say like, you know, I miss the old you.
Yeah.
Right. Or like, what we want to do is say like, I'm noticing that you're, you know, making some changes or whatever, or like, that's interesting that you've changed your mind about this. Can you tell me what's going on for you? Right. Like, because we're not judging, we're just asking for that from their perspective, like what is happening and how is it helpful? Right. Because all of these behaviors are helping them cope. And so we want to remember that every single thing that they're doing as a result of this loss, this is true for adults too. Every single thing that they're doing after that is a way to support their coping. So we want to ask, how is this helping you? What's important about changing this right now? You know, what would you feel like if you didn't make this change? Or, you know, what feeling is this helping you deal with? Sometimes we can ask, because we can really get insight into, well, because when I wore these colors, my mom died, and I'm never going to wear these colors again so that nobody else dies. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know how this is helping. You don't know how this is like supporting their own ability to like reconcile what happened. And so we want to just be open and ask and not judge their responses. Like we don't want to be critical of their experience. If they're stealing and lying and whatever, like we can discipline and have these like boundaries in place. Like, I know that you're upset, but no matter how we get upset, how upset we get, it's not okay to do this. Let's find healthier ways to move through this. Let's find whatever that action is giving you, whether it's power, control, safety, a feeling of distraction, whatever that's giving you, we're going to find out what the utility of this behavior is. And then we're going to introduce healthier ways to achieve that same experience. Like if they're seeking power and they're stealing and they're lying, that could be because they're trying to become independent when they feel so dependent and they lost the person they depend on. So now they're trying to become independent. Now they're trying to like take control of their own life. And so what we want to understand is like, why is that? What's going on? What is this doing for you? And then if like, I'm scared that I won't be able to support myself, or I, you know what I mean? Like whatever the answer is, we want to offer them additional ways to get that feeling and achieve that need. And we want to do that in a supportive way and in a way that is attuned to the fact that they're not just acting out because they're a dick now. They're not just, they're not just
Exactly.
being bad and trying to, and becoming like antisocial or something. Like that's not what's happening. They're trying to cope. And so this process can happen for a year. And then again, it happens later, right? Like remember that these developmental stages come with a burst of brain activity. And this information resurfaces and is able to be processed at another level. And so they're going to need to reprocess that again.
I've talked to adults that have lost their parents when they were children at, any given age, whatever it is, and are still processing it 20 and 30 years later.
Right. Right. And so when we're going to process it as much as we can in the real time, we're going to, if we have the opportunity to reprocess it again later in our childhood. So like, let's say it happens when we're 9. Well, when we hit puberty, when we go through that like adolescence, it's going to come back up. And we might not, as parents, immediately associate it with that. So like at 12, years later, when you think everybody's kind of moved on, they're going to start doing something weird or different or whatever. And then, but know that like, this could be a resurgence of that information. And so it needs to be processed again. So if we can process it again, and then when they're 17, when they're 15 is really the next one. So when we're 15, we're going to reprocess it again. And then when we're an adult, we're going to reprocess it again. And then when we're in our late 20s, we're going to reprocess it again, right? Because those are all the times that our brain has another stage of developmental growth. And it's going to, that information is going to need to be reconciled within their new capacity to understand what went on and how it affected them. And so it opens up that pain again, right? Because the pain that we feel as a child is different than the pain that we feel as a teenager, is different than the pain, right? Because it changes our reality in a different way.
Right.
So the context changes, their ability to experience the feelings is greater. So we can handle more depth. So it's like, it just is going to keep coming up. And so, our brain isn't really fully developed until we're in our like mid to late 20s.
Right.
And so that's going to come up again. It's going to come up again when they have kids. It's going to come up again when they get married. It's going to come up again when they lose their job. It's going to come up again when they have a traumatic experience. It's going to come up, right? So because every single experience is more synapses, is more availability for processing. And so we're going to give ourselves space for that.
And so as the other parent or as the new caregiver, do you suggest reigniting that conversation and just checking in every so often, every couple of years when you see changes in behavior? Like how can the other parent or the now caregiver help that child and really support that child in age appropriate ways?
I think it depends on the severity of the behavior. It depends on, but like what we want to do is we want to be mindful that this could possibly be another one of those times.
Yeah.
And so we want to just kind of have that in the back of our mind. And the utility of behavior is always the same. So like whether or not we're changing our behavior because of a loss or we're changing our behavior because of something else, behaviors and changes have utility no matter what. So anytime something's going on and you notice a change in behavior of an adult or a kid or whatever, you're going to say to that person, what's helpful about that, right? You're going to kind of want to know what's the benefit for this person internally by making this change, by doing this thing, by acting this way. How's that helpful to them in the context of like just dealing with life and coping with difficulty? So we want to kind of just have an open mind about that. And then the more open we are, the more truthful they can be. And so we want to let them have their insight and let them have their truth without trying to change it. And so the more we allow their truth to exist and be their reality without trying to change their reality, but trying to like acknowledge that makes sense, And there's other things that we can do. Like, let's talk more about how we can help you feel this different, like feel differently in effective and cope and healthy ways. So as the therapist, I tell kids, I help people feel better on the inside so that they don't have to, do these hurtful things on the outside anymore.
Oh, I love that.
Because when we're hurt and when we're distressed and when we're desperate and when we're in grief, we do harmful things.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's harmful to ourselves, our future, it doesn't have to be physically harmful. Maybe it's just like we start getting bad grades and then we're damaging our ability to get into college, whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But when we feel better on the inside, we don't have to do harmful things in order to cope with that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we don't feel good on the inside, we often use behaviors that end up becoming harmful because we don't think we have other options. And so that's what we're always doing is we're saying, we're offering new options, right? We're saying, let's come up with more ways that you can feel better on the inside than just that one thing that you're doing.
I love that. Of course, therapy is an important part
Right.
of the grief cycle and dealing with that. I know it was kind of back to the dog thing. It was kind of interesting because I had my therapy appointment the day after we lost her, and it was just so strange and amazing all at the same time because I was really in need of support. So it was kind of nice that I didn't have to get an emergency appointment or anything like that. And I spent my entire session on it, and it was really good and it was really helpful, and she was great. But I feel like, I mean, it's a dog. It's not a person. It's not my parent. I loved her. She was a really big part of our lives, but I can imagine it being that much more of a thing when it's a human and especially a caregiver and it's not a 44-year-old brain.
Mm-hmm. And it has a lot to do with, well, first of all, I want to encourage you not to judge your level of grief because of the dog versus a person, because I don't think that that is fair to you in your own process, because your reality is your reality and it's happening right now. And that's what's going on for you.
Well, thank you. I
So,
appreciate that.
you deserve to have as much or grief as is going through your body in this moment. The relationship is what changes the level of grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
a caregiver to a child, that relationship matters so much, right? A partner to an adult, a spouse or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because what's happening is we have to rewrite our own narrative as we lose the things that we get from that person. We have to, as we talk about the loss of our parents as older adults, or, if you think about like the relationship between you and that person is what's going to complicate your grief. So let's say I'm estranged from a parent and that parent passes away. That relationship is what complicates my experience of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm, all of the things that are going to be associated with that relationship in my mind are going to be what kind of come up for me in that moment. The things that are not reconciled between me and that person, the things that I maybe have like associated with that person about myself or about whatever, like my worldview revolving around my relationship with that person is going to now become available for reconciliation. Now I have to make sense of the world again in a way that doesn't have this person and this relationship in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because our relationships are how we define ourselves. We often define ourselves through the context of our relationships with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not
Yeah.
often just defining ourselves as like an individual, independent, autonomous organism that is not connected to any others.
Right.
Because our relationship to ourselves has a lot to do with our relationships with our kids, with our parents, with our friends, with our job, with our family, with our pets, with our environment. So what's going to happen is that the context of everything that is involved in that relationship is going to now be up for discussion. So there is no conceivable formulaic, amount of grief that is appropriate for any thing or any individual or any relationship.
I love that. Thank you. That was very comforting. And I appreciate you saying that because I think for me, it was easy. It was easy for me to be like, it's a dog, okay? And I loved her, and like I'm not saying I didn't or I didn't care about her. I don't still want her here, but I was like trying to be like, well, hey, it's a dog. Like, move on. You knew this was gonna happen. Dogs don't live forever. Blah blah blah. And I'm trying to like coach myself out of it, and I didn't until my therapy appointment. So fast forward 24 hours, didn't give myself that space. And as you can see me talking about it, I'm still not.
Yeah, because it takes time. And processing and reprocessing information isn't a one and done. Like, I have taken a Spanish class, but I'm not fluent in Spanish.
Yeah,
I have
right.
to integrate that information. I have to apply it. I have to think about it in different contexts, right? And like, as we talked about in the beginning, like the complicated and differing thought patterns that come in can often be contradictory to one another. And so we have to allow our brain to like process each channel and not interfere with each other, right? Like we don't want to shut down any one channel of processing just because it makes us uncomfortable or we don't 100% agree with that particular idea or that particular thought pattern, because none of us 100% agree on anything almost any time.
Right.
People are complicated.
Very.
We are dynamic. Many things can be true at once. And so we need to give ourselves that space of like, how are we talking to ourselves about it? How are we allowing ourselves to feel our feelings and like give ourselves permission to experience what we're experiencing and not judge it and not minimize it? Because judging and minimizing is a coping skill.
Yeah.
It's a way for you to say, like you said, like, it's just like, this isn't that bad. Like, I'm okay. This isn't that bad. Like you're basically telling yourself, like, stop feeling so bad because this isn't like, you just are begging yourself to feel less bad. So it's not that, it's mean or it's just that that process of like that thought process of like, it's just a dog, it's just a dog, it's just a dog. There's utility there. It's serving its purpose and distancing yourself from it. And that's okay, but that's not your only truth. You also have to say like, this is also part of like, this is also really hard for these other reasons too.
Yeah. And there are multiple.
Right.
I mean, right down to, and I don't want to get into it because guess what time it is?
I know, I can't even believe it's been
crazy.
an hour.
I know, but I looked up and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, same.
But it disrupted my feeling of safety, to be honest. And I didn't realize how much, I mean, you met her, I had a giant German Shepherd.
Yeah.
And, I felt extremely safe. Like, okay, things can happen around me. It's totally fine. She's got me. We're good. I slept very well at night with her patrolling my house, and so it really hit me, like you said, in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different places. And it wasn't just my best friend. It wasn't just my first baby. It was a safety thing. And that was really tough for me.
The relationship with her, that you had is served a lot of purposes in your narrative.
Yeah.
Right. The support that you gained and the things that the relationship helped you with, right, are now having to be reconsidered.
Yeah.
So let that happen. And that's what, when we talk about therapy and EMDR specifically, what that does is it allows our brain to go down all of those channels and just let it do its thing. So what EMDR does is it allows us to sort of get out of the way and let our brain go all the way down that road, clear out that channel of like, and reconcile that channel's thought process. And then it'll take you to another channel and another channel and another channel. And what it's doing is it's allowing to clear out all of that unknown, that misunderstanding, that confusion, that pain. It basically is like, I'm not going to stop you from going down that road, even though it's not 100% true, like that you're unsafe now.
Right.
But
exactly.
I'm going to let, like, your brain needs to work through that. Everything now is up for reconsideration. So your brain needs to work through that channel. Your brain needs to work through the channel of it's just a dog. Your brain needs to work through the channel of, I can't go on. Your brain needs to, and so when we do EMDR therapy, what we're doing is we're getting out of the way and we're not judging those channels. We're not saying, well, that doesn't make sense. Don't go down there.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying, well, if that's where your brain, if there's stuff in there that needs to be figured out, let your brain do that. I trust your brain to move through what it needs to move through. And so that's the same kind of context that I'm saying with kids is like, let them go down those roads, but keep them safe in the zone of like, right now, I'm here with you and we're going to get through this together. And you might have lots of different thoughts and questions, and we're going to go through those together.
Mm-hmm. Everybody needs you in their life. I know that might be really tough for you, but everybody needs you, Laura. So if everybody wants to get in touch with you and connect with you, what's the best way?
Everybody can go to my website at benavieri.com. It's BENAVIERI.com. All my socials at Benavieri. And, I am hopefully available to everybody through this particular channel of podcasting, so even if we've never met, I'm here for you. And I want you to know that you deserve to go through what you go through and to have your truth be your truth, and never take yourself out of that, and never let anybody else convince you that it's not good enough for your, reality.
I love that. That right there, my friend, was clip worthy. We're going to be clipping that one out. We're going to be sharing that with everybody.
Yes.
Because Laura is human. I know it doesn't seem like it. She seems superhuman, but she is human. So everybody might be difficult for her, but she does take care of a lot of our mamas and a lot of our local people here. And we love and appreciate you, Laura. So thank you so much for being here with us each and every month. And we hope that you guys out there enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you want to check out any of our previous episodes, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we've been doing this forever. So hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. Scroll down just a little bit and you will see the mental wealth playlist. And there you will have access to all of our previous episodes, including this one. If you prefer the podcast style, hop over to your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio, and there you can connect with us as well. Thank you so much again. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.